Okay, I'm going to call the November 19th, 2019 regular school board meeting of Independent School District 622. The first thing on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, and the next thing we have is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
Moved by Livingston. Second by Navy. All in favor say aye. Aye. And all opposed say nay. We have an approved agenda. Next we have public comment. Kim, do we? Okay, thank you. And then we have the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of routine items that are acted on in a single motion. Board members have the option of pulling items off the agenda if they wish to discuss them individually. This evening's consent agenda includes A, minutes of October 22nd, 2019 business meeting. B, minutes of November 12th, 2019 work study session. C, routine personnel. D, joint powers agreement, Washington County. E, disbursements. Are there any items that anyone would like to pull? Steve? D. Okay, so for the consent agenda, can I get a motion and a second to approve A, B, C, and E? Okay, moved by Anderson. Second by Auger. All in favor say aye. Aye. And all opposed say nay. Okay, so that part of the consent agenda is approved, and then Steve.
So I think that sometimes we become a little complacent about the things that we put in the consent agenda because we're either familiar with them as a board or they come up as a routine thing all the time. So I thought it might be appropriate to pull the joint powers agreement just to have that explained a little bit to the board before we vote, so we have some public acknowledgement of what the joint powers agreement is.
So a joint powers agreement is between two governmental entities that collaborate to provide some kind of a service or program. In this case, we have before you, we have a joint powers agreement with Washington County for election services. So what this spells out, this joint powers agreement spells out is the duties that each entity, ourselves, the district, and then Washington County have to provide. So when we have elections that we put on, whether for school board or for questions, we contract with Washington County to provide those services. They provide the voting machines, they hire the voting judges, they do all those types of things. So when we had our special election in May, both Washington County and Ramsey County provided those services for us. And so we don't have to spend the money on the voting machines, et cetera. And so during a general election, they will use our facilities. But in those cases where we don't have anything on the election ballot, then they provide the services for the county or the city entities. In those instances where we also have an election that we are running in concurrent with the city and or county, then we share in some of those costs. Where we provide those services exclusively, we provide the total cost. And this kind of spells out a little bit about who does what, who provides what, et cetera. So we have a joint powers agreement with both Washington County and then also with Ramsey to provide these services. So this JPA is 2011, and so their county attorney put it together. I looked at it, suggested a couple of changes, and so it's before you tonight. So any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
So this is kind of an updated, a revision of an agreement we've had since 2011, you said? Actually,
this JPA is from 2011, but I think the election services started way back when, like 2003 or even before then. So, yeah.
So So a lot of this is just who's financially responsible for which. They pay some of the bills and then we pay them for the services.
Yeah, actually, they're quite reasonable, and so, you know, they actually come out with a schedule, but it's, both counties have been very good partners when we call on them for elections. So it's been a good collaboration between the city, the county, and then, of course, the school district when we have elections.
And then we provide a lot of the actual election space, and then they provide the services to run the elections. That's how it works.
Great question. That's exactly right. By law, we have to provide the space. And then you're exactly right. They provide the services. That's one of their statutorily requirements. So now with these voting machines, et cetera, they have a lot of money tied up into them. So both counties have rather new voting machines now too. So, yep.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So, should I read the resolution, Kim? Be it read.
We can just ask for a motion and a second for item D.
Okay, so I need a motion and a second for item D.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Hunt, second. Second by Navy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed say nay. Okay, that also carries. Thank you, Steve and Randy, for that. Okay, next on the agenda, we have our reports and we have our student board representatives. And Manny, do you want to start? North? Okay, thanks.
That's correct. All right. The first trimester of the school year is coming to a close as finals approach on the 25th and 26th of November. Fall sports are all wrapped up, but that didn't come without a fair share of excitement as the girls volleyball team made it to the state tournament in the XL Energy Center. The first game faced off against Lakeville North, who was higher ranked than them, which they, I guess in a way, upset 3-0, which matched them up with a semifinal game against Wyzetta, which they lost to a team with 4 players over 6'3", which pretty crazy. Set them up for a third place finish, which they beat the Minnetonka team. I think there was 3-1. And then among the next 2 weeks, various colleges will be visiting North to go talk with juniors and seniors about their college programs. These college programs include St. Scholastica, Hamlin, and the University of Wisconsin-River Falls. With Spamalot being finished, all showings are finished. The fans of the North High Performing Arts will have to shift their eyes to the Northern Lights Show Choir, which is putting on a clinic open to all grades 1 through 12, which will be on the 6th and 7th of December. Lastly, the Red Cross came to North and set up a blood drive, which was a great success because lots of students of all ages decided to participate and help save lives in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, so like Manny mentioned, finals are coming up really fast, and because of that, Saturday school has been really successful so far. I know last Saturday it was a packed house. I mean, I heard from a couple of my buddies there wasn't a seat open in the library, teachers running around like crazy, giving great help. So fall sports are also wrapping up, but in the coming weeks, boys and girls basketball will be starting up, as well as boys hockey, Nordic ski. The North Tartan girls hockey team has already taken a couple of good commanding wins so far in their season. Our activities in fine arts have also been doing very well as of recently. Tartan Theater is already getting ready for their next production, which will be a Charlie Brown Christmas, running from December 6th to the 8th. Tartan has also begun competing in Quiz Bowl competitions, with Mario Valento placing 3rd out of 200 students in last Thursday's competition. Tartan Jazz visited Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin 2 weekends ago to perform at their annual jazz festival. Tartan Choir sang at the Veterans Day breakfast at Inwood Oaks. And Tartan also hosted the 622 craft and vendor fair, as well as the Taste of 622 event right at the beginning of the month. It was a great opportunity for us in NHS to get some hours helping the vendors set up and take down. And the NHS officers were also able to put together a couple of gift baskets for auction at the Taste of 622 event.
Nice, okay, thanks a lot, you guys. Any questions or comments? You know, when the colleges come to visit, have you experienced that before, either of you, and what is that like?
The first one was
Microphone.
Oh, gotcha. All right. The first one was St. Scholastica, which was today, which I wasn't very interested in, but I'll be attending the UW River Falls and Hamlin one. From what I've heard, it's been a pretty informative experience, and it's pretty quick as well, because the students that left my class in third hour were back within like 10 minutes.
All right, thanks, you guys. Okay, next on our agenda is our program feature with Tricia and Nikki.
Good evening, Board Chair Yenner, Superintendent Tuccio Osorio, and members of the board. This evening, it's my pleasure to introduce Nikki Clymer. Nikki's our EL supervisor, and we'll be highlighting some of the EL programming and supports we offer to our students in 622.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. As Tricia said, my name is Nikki Clymer, and I would just like to walk you through some updates and give you some highlights about our EL program here in 622. So District 622 currently has 1,450 EL students. We have EL students enrolled across the district in every school. Our EL numbers are increasing, and over the summer we had nearly 500 families register students at the enrollment center who indicated a home language other than English. Many of these students qualified for EL services and are now part of our EL community. Our ELs are a culturally and linguistically diverse population, speaking an amazing 73 different languages at home. Spanish, Hmong, and Somali are our three predominant languages, making up 85% of our EL population. This mirrors the Minnesota EL demographics for the three top languages in the state. This year we saw an increase in Nepali, Tigrinya, Karen, Karenni, and Oromo speakers. Over the past 20 years, ELs in Minnesota have increased by 300%, making them Minnesota's fastest growing student population. Last year, Minnesota enrolled 73,128 students with EL learner status, and that was an increase of 1.7% from the year before. Currently, 8% of the Minnesota residents were born outside of the United States. Our 622 EL population is the 10th largest in the state. We share the top 10 with neighboring metro districts. Osseo, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Burnsville are a few, and outside the metro, St. Cloud and Rochester. We are a district of choice for our EL families. Our growing EL population is made up of many different students with varying language needs. We have recently arrived students heavily from Central America this year, and some of these students meet the state guidelines for what MDE designates as SLIFE students. SLIFE stands for Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. We also have many LTELs, and these are long-term ELs, many of which were born in the United States. We have approximately 200 duly identified students that share both an EL and SPED designation. And we also have migrant students that come and go in our district and across other neighboring districts. With recent changes to ESSA, ELs are part of the accountability of school improvement towards English proficiency and progress. Students' English proficiency is measured annually through the Access Assessment as part of a Minnesota standardized procedure. All ELs receive language instruction from a licensed EL teacher and content credit from a licensed teacher in that area. 622 has adopted an inclusive service model for all English instruction. EL students receive the majority of their English language instruction in their core content classes. Research shows that language is learned most effectively with connection to content and multiple opportunities to use academic language. The inclusive service model focuses on an asset-based approach, which is supported by WIDA framework that emphasizes the capabilities that EL students have at each language level and domain. ELs are taught in co-taught classes, in small targeted groups, and in ELD courses. EL is not a quick fix, but rather a scaffold language instruction for our emergent bilinguals. English language instruction is provided on a continuum for both academic and language growth. So we're very fortunate to have opportunities for professional development for our EL teachers and our other staff. And professional development opportunities are required for EL and non-EL staff. And it's designated to enhance the ability of teachers, principals, and other school leaders to understand and implement curriculum, assessment practices, measures, and instructional strategies for ELs. This most recent picture is of professional development of co-teaching last month. We had the secondary SPED teachers, EL teachers, and the content teacher that they co-teach with come together for a training that was done right here in this room. We also have upcoming things and past professional development. On Friday, we have 15 EL teachers going to Minnesota TESOL conference in St. Paul, one of which will be presenting at that conference. We've had extensive PD on advocacy and trauma, which is particularly relevant to some of our recently arrived students right now. So lots of opportunities to continue to learn. Our family and parent community engagement is a new focus for our EL department, and our district strengthens parent, family, and community engagement in our schools by providing resources and activities designated to increase the English language proficiency of our ELs. And this past summer, we had a task force that was put together of various stakeholders, including EL teachers, cultural liaisons, administrators, and EL parents, to partner and create some district guidelines on EL family engagement. And as you are aware, I'm sure of many events that are ongoing throughout our district. We have school-specific events that are held, literacy night, fine arts night, cultural fairs. We just had a Dia de Muertos that was held at Cowan in partnership with Community Ed, and as well as language-specific presentations. So our cultural liaisons work with us closely and with our community partnerships to provide meaningful communication to our families. And we have our liaisons that speak Spanish, Hmong, and Somali, and they are continually working with outreach, calling families. We use language line when we're not able to get in touch with a district liaison, as well as sending messages home through Blackboard, texting, emailing, and various ways of communicating. So it's a high priority. So that was very quick and brief, but it just wanted to give you an overview of some of the things that are happening, and I would be more than happy to speak further with anybody if they had questions or concerns about anything. So I appreciate your time and support. Thank you.
So could you describe for me what the experience is from the family's perspective? They just moved to the district and they've got to send their kids to school and they show up somewhere. What's the family's, of all these experiences that you shared with us, what does the family see first and how are they introduced to the breadth of
Yeah.
opportunities that are available?
That's an excellent question, and because I don't have their perspective, but to try to imagine some of the things that they are experiencing. So what we want to do is make our district and our schools as welcoming as we can to families that have maybe a different culture, or speak a different language. So I think that's the most important thing, and we have heard from families that feel that that this is a district of choice for them because of that, because they feel welcome at the enrollment center, that they have a liaison reach out to the school, that we have an interpreter maybe ready for the first day if it's a language that we don't have on staff here. But yeah, they're navigating all different kinds of things, and school culture is completely different for some of our families.
So just to follow up on that for
Yeah.
a second, how is the introduction of a EL learner brought into the individual classroom? For instance, a first or second or third grader who shows up on our doorstep, and we welcome the family and the child. So from the staff's perspective, how do they identify and sort of cushion or welcome that student's experience, and how does that work in the schools?
Yeah, so we rely heavily on our EL teachers at each school to provide a warm welcome and a transition into the classroom. So it might look slightly different at each building, but some things that we've done in the past is to provide, if there's another student in the school that speaks the same language, we might buddy them up and just give them that comfort that they need. That would be one example. Just, for the most part, they're normal kids, and they're just, they're acclimated to the classroom and doing things, and just giving them a lot of visuals and being able to reach out to their families through a liaison or interpreter. But those are good questions. And
I'm privileged in the work that I do to have several families who are now, not through my intervention, but are now, have students in our school district who have nothing but the best things and the highest praise for not only their experience, but the experiences that their children are bringing home and sharing with them. So I think what you're doing is working really well.
If I could just add a few things. If you weren't aware, my career as a teacher before I ever went into administration was an EL teacher. That was my background. I was an EL teacher at the elementary level for new arrivals, and also an EL teacher for adults new to the country, teaching adults who are new English language learners. And so this is a topic near and dear to my own heart. Spent many years in this field. And there's many things that I think we do well, and there's a lot of ways we need to grow. I definitely want to see us expand and grow our own interpretation or language interpretation translation services. I want to expand our work with cultural liaisons. This year, we in the past, a lot of our cultural liaisons were working part-time. And this year, we expanded all of our cultural liaisons to be full-time positions. Given the rate of growth that we've seen in our language immersion, our immigrant families, our cultural liaisons have been really tasked with not only being liaisons to the families, helping out with the interventions in the classrooms, but also interpreting constantly for our families, and also doing written translations for our district. And they've just been stretched really thin. And I think the hotline that we use, that we call the language hotline, has been really helpful, but that does not take the place of a human person. And so we made a big leap this year by expanding all of those positions to be full-time, and we could use more. I think there's a lot we can do in our district to really dramatically increase translated materials, and I think we've got a ways to go with that. But I will say the team that we do have is amazing, and they've made taken our department in leaps and bounds. And Nikki's leadership in our district has been fantastic. She's done fantastic work for us. She previously worked in St. Paul schools. She came to us and has done a fantastic job bringing together some of those best practice strategies. Our goal is to provide shelter and support where needed, but students who are new and learning the language need to have access to native speaking role models. So you can't shelter away a new arriving immigrant student into a small group where they're only learning English with other peers learning English. They have to have exposure to native language speaking peers in the mainstream as well. And there's always that question of how much do you shelter and how much do you include in the mainstream, and where's that line? And all over the world, all over the metro, there's controversy about how far that line should be pushed. And we've done a really, I think, thoughtful job of working with our families and our instructional staff and our students to talk to them about where that line is. So I really credit Nikki's leadership in trying to figure out where that line should be and continuing to push on us on where we think the next step should be. So kudos to her leadership, and we're just really grateful that you're on our team and helping to guide us.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, Nikki. Two really quick questions. Can one assume that every EL teacher has dual language or multiple language?
No,
Okay.
actually,
Okay.
so the licensure is, it's ESL licensure, and that's a very common question. People will ask, every EL teacher gets asked that, how many languages do you speak? And so they speak English, and that is what is required. So, yeah.
And then do our services, are they just K through 12, or do you encompass preschool? Because I know that we have the adult enrichment classes, but does your scope include beyond?
Yeah, so with the addition of the voluntary preschool, it does start there, and we screen and we support. As far as daily EL service, really begins in kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I could just add a little something to that. The reason for that is because the way preschool is taught lends itself naturally to language development. So if you think about what a child needs who's learning a second language, it's not unlike what you need to learn a first language. And so what happens in an early childhood setting lends itself very well to language development. And so it's a little less necessary to have a separate EL language teacher in that environment. And that's part of the rationale for that. The need becomes greater when you are in a higher level grade and you have more of that intentional need for a separate language development teacher.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks
Right,
very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have Superintendent Tucci Osorio with facilities.
Okay, great. I'm going to actually step down to the presentation slide deck for just a moment. Okay, Chair Yana, Directors of the Board, happy to talk about facilities for a moment. Before I do that, as part of my update for this evening, I just want to take a quick moment to talk about the fact that we have a board member this evening who's going to be recognized at the upcoming MSBA Leadership Conference for 20 years of service, Nancy Livingston. So I have to bring that up right now because this is kind of that time of year where everybody's getting registered for that conference. It's a conference that takes place in January. It's Minnesota School Boards Association Leadership Conference. And it's unusual to see someone who's served that long. So I want to bring that up because Nancy's been involved in school board work for a very long time. And we're really excited to have that honor for our school district to see somebody receive such a prestigious award. And that's coming up in January. And I wanted to mention that because we're going to have a really good time celebrating that honor for our school district. So I just wanted to mention that as part of my update for this evening. So looking forward to that honor, Nancy, and can't wait to celebrate with you. So thank you. So going forward, I have a couple things I'm going to update you on this evening. The first is going to be facilities, and the second one is going to be the calendar. So we'll start with, and then of course, policies. We love to talk policies, right? The first one, we're going to talk facilities right now. And what I'd like to do is just kind of give you an update on where we're at with some of the projects and underway. You know, you've heard me talk quite a bit about Castle and Richardson. As you may recall, Castle and Richardson were the two projects that got started before we went out for our facilities bond referendum. They were started with some funds that we had already set aside before we began our whole campaign for the facilities bond referendum. And so these were 2 projects that we were able to begin ahead of time. As we've talked about many times before, these are projected for completion by the end of December. I want to add on, there will always be some cosmetic changes. We call it a punch list, those tiny little details that we're going to be going back and checking over long after December is done, as teachers and other staff find a little, a chip of paint or an outlet that somehow didn't get put where it needed to. We're going to be looking over those things for months to come after the project's completed. But we are going to be having some ribbon cutting ceremonies coming up. Right now, we've also been collecting survey feedback from our staff at these first 2 big projects. Staff have been able to tell us about how they have felt about the first 2 projects that we've had: furniture, functionality, performance, how that's been going. And then also, not only how they felt about the renovations themselves, but the furniture that they've had to work with as well. We also know that we want to know that as we plan and use their feedback, how can we best learn from these first 2 experiences as we look forward to the next buildings that are currently under design phase, and then the projects that are going to be designed beyond that. Current work at Castle and Richardson, the main entrance at Castle, if you've been by it, the main entrance is quite a statement. It's got quite an architectural statement at the beginning entrance of that, so that's obviously being finalized. The pre-care area at Richardson's been one of the last pieces to come together. Right now we're working really on details, finishing the lighting settings, the audio systems. If you were not aware, part of our design plans at this and all of our projects in District 622 is to have voice amplification in every single classroom. You just heard from Nikki, who runs our EL programming. There's a lot of research now about classroom environments that if somebody speaks into a microphone and you have the ability to speak into a microphone, there's so much it brings to a classroom environment. Number one, if I'm a teacher and I can speak in a calm voice, it can bring a sense of calm without me elevating my voice and energy level and stress level to try to rein in classroom management. There's that element to it. But furthermore, when you have students with special learning needs, or you have EL students who are learning English as a second language, it makes it very much easier to understand and learn in the environment if you can really hear the enunciation of a teacher or another student who's giving a class presentation, for that matter. If you've ever been in class environments where a young student is presenting something and you can't hear what they're saying, the rest of the class tunes out, you lose that student voice in the class environment, and all of their precious words and all their hard work are kind of lost in the environment. With the new voice amplification systems that we have in place, anybody who's speaking, their voice is elevated. And so we're very excited about this piece because there's so much research around the importance of this. So not only will Castle and Richardson have these in place, and they're finally up and running, every program and system, every classroom that we're working on throughout the district has these places, are being put in place, the class voice amplification. So that's underway. The painting work, the shelving and storage, and then obviously the balancing and stabilization of the heating systems. Now, that seems a little odd to be saying, but when you put whole new systems in place and you're working around a very large building, a lot of it requires training. How do you set things to fire up at the right time? How do you set the controls and adjustments so that the heat flows where you need it to flow when you can? There's a lot of controls involved in these buildings, and training our engineers to maximize the efficiency of these buildings. They're not a flip a switch and everything's perfect, because you're talking about a lot of square footage, and how do you maximize energy efficiency and the heating and cooling so that every occupant in the building is comfortable at the right times of the day and when they need it to be. So still working on those details. We do have ribbon cutting ceremonies set up, and with these are open houses. These are open to the community. We've got these 2 dates set. You've seen these before. January 15th will be for Castle. January 29th will be for Richardson. As I've mentioned before, we're going to have also staff development dates set so that folks who work in other buildings in the district will just come there for staff development so they can have a chance to just be in the buildings and see what's there. Not so that they feel bad that they're in another building and don't get to work at Castle and Richardson, but that they get a sense to see what's coming for their own work environments, and also to get a sense of, what's worked, what's maybe something we're going to tweak as we move forward to other design phases. And as promised, we are also working on virtual tours, so digital tours. We really feel strongly that our taxpayers who maybe are not able-bodied, maybe live out of state part of the time, snowbirds who maybe pay taxes here but live in Florida and don't want to come, aren't going to be able to come and see right away. We want people who maybe aren't able to get over there and tour physically, that they can tour virtually online. And as promised, we're going to have virtual tours set up online. People can go and see these sites once they're ready to go as well. So that's also still underway. As I mentioned, the next 2 sites in design phase are Carver and John Glenn. Carver, pre-construction work's already happening, fencing, creating paths, that sort of thing. John Glenn is nearing the end of its design phase, preparing some documents for bids. We have a neighborhood meeting coming up next week, November 26th. Information's gone out to all the local neighbors who live around John Glenn. We always, and we did this a month or 2 ago with the Carver neighborhood, so that people who live around that building can hear first and foremost what's coming, what's happening, what the plans are, what the timelines are. This coming work session early next month after the Thanksgiving break, we have a work session of our school board meeting, and you're going to have an opportunity to see virtual tours of both John Glenn and Carver in their design phase. And just so the public knows, work sessions are open to the public. They are not broadcast on camera, but they are open to the public. And we do want people to know you can come to those meetings. You're going to get an opportunity to get a glimpse into what these buildings are going to look like. We have opened up time before and after those meetings for the board members and any public members who show up who want to spend a little extra time looking at those design plans. So we'll have those available at the December 3rd work session. And of course, for both of those projects, construction is set to begin spring of 2020. As we look forward to designing our 2 new elementary schools, we've got core planning team put together, and we've again included representation of every elementary staff from the 6 buildings that are not currently already involved in a project. We know these 2 new schools belong to all of 622. And we know that students and staff from around the district will be a part of occupying these buildings, and so we've made sure they're a part of the design phase. We've toured sites all around the metro to get ideas in our planning, and those planning meetings are continuing through the end of November. And then we're also having some staff-specific listening sessions through December and early January. And that has to do with if you work in specific categories, if you're in special education or in science or music, we want to make sure your voice is specifically heard in regards to your content areas. Again, we're also looking forward to Skyview Middle School renovations as well, so that work has already begun. And we've had representation involved in that planning across all our middle schools because, again, we know every building we work on belongs to the whole district. And staff, students, families from any part of our district could eventually be a part of that school community, and we want to make sure that we think systemically and not just for that school, that neighborhood, but we think about what school district needs might be. Again, these are our standard timelines. They have not changed. You can follow those online as well. Castle and Richardson will be the first 2 to be complete. That punch list I mentioned to you are those kind of little details that we're going to continue to clean up after the projects are done. Carver, John Glenn are coming on board spring of 2020. They'll be worked on for a couple of years. The 2 new elementary school, the construction will begin next August. And then Skyview Middle School renovations will begin next fall. That'll be the next phase of the work. So lots of projects happening, very much a lot of excitement happening along the way. And I should add this as well. These are the major renovations. We also know that Weaver and Cowan are 2 schools that are not dramatically changing the footprint of their building, but as we've agreed, they will also be getting new entrances, right? We talked about secure entrances for those sites. As these projects get bid out and we figure out where the timeline is fitting on the big projects, then we're going to fit into the timing of where the smaller projects are going to fit into the timeline as well. So those are not forgotten. We've already agreed that obviously those are going to be in the timelines as well, so we'll update you on those as well as when we figure out those smaller projects, because we know that those secure entrances, as we've promised, are going everywhere, and we're not going to forget those as well. And again, as soon as all these get organized, we're going to be working on when the high school timelines are going to exist. And our dream is to move them as fast as we feel the construction world can handle us. So we know that we're very excited to keep moving forward on our high school planning as well. Another commitment we've been very clearly making is sticking to being on time and on budget. we know that if we were to go over budget on these earlier projects, we shortchange our high schools later. So I give credit to Randy and his team and everybody a part of these meetings. We're very, very clear we cannot go over budget on the early projects or we will shortchange our high schools. So we've been really diligent about that. I'm very proud of that. It's been a big piece of that. One final comment I want to make about facilities and all this entire conversation about, because we have to thank our voters every day for the work that they did to help us pass this last year. This past week, a lot of folks received proposed tax statements, came out for the proposed property tax statements for the coming year. And there's been a lot of phone calls, a lot of conversations about people's proposed tax statements. A lot of concerns, in fact. People saw some big jumps in their proposed tax statements. Immediately, I contacted with Randy and our Ellers, which is our financial advisors, to really dig into these. And I want to thank people who actually sent us their actual tax statements. A couple of our board members actually sent us their personal tax statements so we could dig into exactly what's happening. A number of folks on our Citizens for 622 team sent us their personal tax statements just so that we could look at it, have our financial advisors look into it. And after some really deep digs and diving into this, I am exceptionally proud to say we stuck exactly to the promises we made on our tax commitments. But I will say this, a lot of people had their homes reassessed for value, and the taxable value, market value of their homes went up dramatically. And that's a good and a bad thing for homeowners. The good thing is homeowners, their value of their home has grown a lot. The bad thing for homeowners is they're taxed on a much higher value of their home. Unfortunately, the school district has no ownership or ability to affect what your taxable market value of somebody's individual home might be. But that apparently has really hit people hard this year. In fact, dramatically hard. We've been seeing reports of people's tax statements where their own home value, the taxable market value of their individual homes has gone up by 10, 20, 30% since last year. And unfortunately, with that, their taxes have gone up incredibly so. In every category, not just the school district's taxes have gone up, but their city and their county taxes and others have gone up likewise as well. And it's quite a hardship. I will say that the state does provide tax relief for people who are hit in those categories, and we're trying to make sure anybody who calls our office is educated about that tax relief the state provides. And we're also, Randy's team has worked really hard to put together actually a calculator that helps people out with those kinds of questions. They worked really diligently Monday morning to put together a tax calculator on that very specific issue. And so everybody that we've talked to, I encourage you, if you have questions about your school district taxes, please do call us. Call our business office, our communications department. We have been willing to talk to each and every homeowner that has called because I think there's definitely some misconception out there that somehow our tax rate went up higher than we thought it did. Honestly, when I first saw some tax statements, I went, what happened here? And we dug into it, and what happened is the taxable market value of homes went up a lot, quite a lot actually. So I want to make that statement. It's not easy for families, though. It's a really, really difficult challenge for people to face, but I want to make sure that we get that message out and we really help people to understand that. I also want to add that these are proposed tax statements. So like our district, we do have our truth in taxation hearing at our next board meeting in December, and every public entity has these. Your city, your county has these, and people have those opportunities to speak up if they have concerns about their tax rates. So I want to open that up to comments and questions, facilities related or the tax related, and I know Randy's standing by to answer questions as well.
Thanks for being proactive on that, because I have heard about concern about
Absolutely.
property taxes. If a person would like to, take issue with the assessed value of their home, they should take that up with the county assessor? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. That's who assesses the property value, so the county assessor, whatever county you live in, reside in.
And I'll be honest, I don't know what else you've been hearing, Randy. We've been hearing it a lot from Ramsey County, much more than Washington County. I would say that the emails I've personally gotten and the comments I've seen online and social media have been coming much more from Ramsey County than Washington County as far as the big leap that's happened. Although, I don't know if you've heard differently, but for me, what I'm seeing much more is a Ramsey County jump. Oh, the Washington County yeah. What we've been hearing is a lot of big jumps in taxable market value in Ramsey County homes.
Christina, I know you said it before, but who should people contact if they do have questions for the district about the tax impacts?
They can call Randy. If they want to contact communications, that's always an easy place to start. And they will be connected with Randy. They can call any one of us, to be perfectly honest. If they can't remember who to contact, they can start with me. Sometimes I'm an easy person to remember. But our district communications line is always open, and they typically take any calls that come in and funnel them to the right people. But Randy's generally our expert and works really closely with our financial team as well on very specific questions. But to be honest, Randy has spent a lot of time in the last couple of days looking at individual tax statements and unpacking them. So he's done a great job. His team's done a great job with that.
Just one of the things I want to clarify, I did give you a sheet. We've been getting some questions too about voter approved versus the other piece. And so just so you can be, have some talking points. So the sheet that I gave you, I kind of highlighted the pay 19 versus the pay 20. And so if you look, the first line tells it all. So as you can see, the general referendum market value voter, the amount went from 17,390,000, about 17,390,000 to 10,709,000. That's voter approved, and this is actually, again, legislative change. So remember the 424 that we moved back into the referendum. This is the 424 for local optional. Now they give us no choice. That was in the legislation in just this past 2019. So what they did was they moved it back into local optional, which is that 424, and that accounts for about over $6 million. So ultimately, they moved it from referendum, which is voter approved, to local optional. We're not getting any more money. They just reclassified it again, put it back under non-voter approved. And then, as you can see, when we look at on the right-hand side there, pay 19 versus pay 20. I want you, first of all, I forgot to go down to the next yellow one, the voter approved. That is our actual $265 million worth of bonds that we sold. You can see the voter approved bonding goes from $4 million to $11,184. So it kind of cancels each other out. The referendum market value kind of cancels out that increase there. So that was a legislative thing up above, and that $4 million to that $11 million in yellow up there was because we sold the bonds. That's our debt service on the bonds. So when we look at the voter approved, this year we have 21,470,000, and it's going to go next year to 21,894,000. Well, that's because of those changes. Otherwise, the voter approved would have been a lot larger had we not had that referendum move back into the non-voter category. And then you can see the other 26 million, 32 million. So when I'm getting questions, it's like, why did this happen? And so what I'm going to do is what I've been doing is trying to explain it over the phone. I'll email them a sheet, that kind of thing. And then the other two sheets we gave you were just from a calculation standpoint. So when I'm working with people, they can see that, the increase in their property values actually had a significant impact, in their taxes. So if it went up 10% and you're currently paying $1,000, it's going to go up $100. And then the school district increase because of the bonding.
Josh, could I have you flip to the sheet that says, if your property market value did not go up by anything? So if you look at this particular sheet, and board members, you have this in front of you. I think this is really interesting.
That's the wrong one, yeah.
That one.
There you go.
So if you look at this one, remember how when we went through the whole bond referendum, and all of our and I'll tell you something, this is not necessarily an easy thing to do. So when this all said and done was recalculated on Monday, I was thrilled to see this number, because when I saw all these property tax statements coming in and I saw the concerns coming in, when Randy sent me this, because this is what we were shooting for. Remember, we were aiming for $60 a year in a tax increase. It's a little bit like aiming on quicksand, right? Because what you have to do is sell a certain amount of bonds, but you're also selling them on a property value of a school district that is it's a moving base, right? So if a Cabela's opens up, or a storefront opens up, or a company changes in value and home values change, your base value is always evolving, right? So you're trying to base everything on a moving base of value that's never stable, right? It's never constant. The fact that at the end of the day, when we actually recalculated, how did we do on our guesstimation on how to sell those bonds? And did we actually stick to our target of a $60 increase per family? Check this out. We said the average home value of $200,000, the increase per family of a $200,000 home would be $60. Look at this. If a property market value did not increase by anything and your home value is $200,000, we hit the target right on the head. It's $58 increase. Now, for people who have a much bigger, and this is not just your voter approved, this is all of your taxes from 622 combined, you would have had an increase by $58. If you had a taxable market value increase on your home, of course you would have more. If your home is worth more money, of course you would have more. But if you owned a $200,000 home and your value did not change, we landed exactly on the head. In fact, we were a little bit under what we told our voters we would be at. And so I was thrilled to see that our promise was kept, and actually a little bit less than what we promised. The troublesome part is that people's home values all got reassessed, and somehow people are being hit with these really big changes in their property values. And people don't necessarily see, they see, oh my gosh, my school district taxes went up a lot. So Randy has put these together for if you had a 0% increase, a 10% increase, a 15%. So we do have these, and it's going to be a little bit of a messaging issue. But before we even put anything out publicly, I wanted him and our financial advisors to actually check the math. Did we actually keep our promise? Was my question Monday morning at 8 a.m. Did we actually keep our promise? And when they sent me this back and said, we checked, we did keep our promise, I was like, thank goodness, because it's not easy to do on a moving target. So I just had to point that out.
Randy, this one, by the way, works for my tax statement. Like, it matches. But I didn't quite understand your description of, that yellow highlighting. I didn't quite understand why the voter approved only went up a tiny bit and the other went up a lot.
If you look at, you want to put it up there?
So just like the.
Because we put more of our funds on the non-voter approved. We sold more of our bonds there.
No, legislatively, that 424 local optional revenue went from being voter approved to non-voter approved. So it shifted back to non-voter approved. And so if you look at that top line, that yellow line, that's a voter approved. This year it's 17,390. Next year it's 10,709. Okay, so what they basically did was legislatively lowered the voter approved to non-voter approved. And then if you look at the green right underneath it, Michelle, you can see that the other went from 1371 to 9410. So technically, those are both kind of the same sources of money right there. It's our referendum, basically is what it is. So they recategorized it for us, which means we shifted, $6 million of voter approved to non-voter approved. And then if you look down at that next yellow line, those are the actual bonds. That's the debt service. It went from 4 million to 11 million. Well, if they wouldn't have moved that 17 or that 6 million up on top, voter approved would have been a lot higher than non-voter approved. Okay. Yeah.
Remind me, Randy, we built in an inflation factor in our bonding.
We did for the referendum, we did, yep,
And
For our operating levy, we did.
operating levy. So that's why this is going up too, because I think inflationary was like 2.28% or whatever.
but that is separate from the inflation a home value would have. I mean, or is it proportional?
That number comes from MDE, so I don't know how they
Okay.
calculate it. So that's something that they actually throw out there. And it's probably very similar to a market basket of goods or, whatever.
That was one of the social media comments that I saw was, oh, that's just the inflation factor. And I didn't respond because I wasn't confident. I didn't think so, but, okay.
The reassessment of home values at that kind of a rate is not just inflationary. It has to do with the market value in your area, your neighborhood, and your type of home.
So Josh, if you just want to go to that 10% increase, and we can kind of just show. So if you look at the orange here, so in this case, the home value went from 200,000 last year. It went up 10%, so now it's 220. And so if you can see there, 220 now is $999 of taxes just on that home value. So there's a $100 increase just based on that 10% increase in that 20,000 or in that 20,000 assessed value. And then here, because now you're not at 200 anymore, you're at 220. Now the bonding on that is actually $66. And it would have been 58 had it stayed at 200, but now it's at 220. So the rate on that makes it $66 instead of 58. So the total increase in this case is $166, $100 because of the property value increase, and $66 because of the bond, the ISD 622 bond. And it would be 58 if it was 200, but it's 220 now, so that's why it's 66.
So some of this, Randy, is because the economy is doing well, right? And there's a lot of demand for homes, and so prices are going up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I just want people to know, and so when they call us, I'm sending them out information so that I can answer their questions, just to be as transparent as possible.
So, when we did our budget, and we did our budget based on the property tax money that we collected on people's property taxes last year. So now actually our budget is going to be increased. The money that we can spend is going to be increased by the increased money that we're collecting on taxes because people's property taxes went up?
Great question, Steve. We get absolutely no more money than what we levied for. So ultimately, because property values are not, we're not getting any more money because of that. We're getting the same amount of money. It's just spread differently. So it depends upon where that money's coming from. Commercial might have went down. I have some folks whose taxes actually did go down because their assessed property went down. So ultimately, some people's taxes their assessed value goes up. Some people's go down. Commercially, what's happening now, why residentials are taking a hit, is because during the recession, the assessors still continued to increase the assessed value of commercial property. And so now those commercial property owners are coming back and saying, quack, hey, what's going on here? And so what's happening is the commercial property basically around the state is going down in value. And who has to absorb that? The residential homeowners. So that's what's happening now. So we don't get any more money.
If I could add just another explanation. So let's just say our $275 million facilities bond was $100, just for simplicity's sake. Our $100 pie is going to be sliced and diced a lot of different ways. So if one homeowner says you're paying a little bit bigger piece of the pie, someone else is paying less. Now remember, these are proposed property tax statements. So let's say everybody's property values went up. At the end of the day, everybody's not going to pay more, at least for our school district piece of it, because our school district piece of it is a fixed dollar amount. Ours is not a percent. Now, other taxes for different entities might be a percent on your ownership property, right? You might be taxed X percent by the city of the county. Ours is actually a fixed dollar amount. So at the end of the day, depending on what the end of the day property values are for everybody, commercial and residential combined, they actually may not end up paying everything that their proposed statement even says they're going to have to pay. Because if everybody's property value is allegedly higher, somebody's not going to pay all that because we don't get to collect more money than we actually levied for, right? So at the end of the day, we have to actually look at the end dollar amount and go, okay, we don't actually get to collect all that money, so we still only get our $100, right? So it's going to be interesting because sometimes the proposed tax statements come out and later on you actually don't pay quite that much. So, and if somebody's goes up and somebody else's doesn't go down, at the end everyone's going to pay a little less anyway.
So Randy, we're doing all this beautification to these schools. Can a school, like what we're doing at Castle or Richardson, can they actually enhance their neighboring, property values? Because I'm assuming the value of those schools now is going to go way up for what we've done.
Absolutely. So what's going to happen is that's one of the pros of having, strong communities and strong schools, is that it maintains property values, increases property, or the thing you want is it increases growth. So for example, residential building, if at all possible, because then this is all spread amongst more properties. So as commercial, finds their way here, or more residential properties are built, our levied amount is spread amongst more. So hopefully, then taxes go down.
The more people that move into our shared community, the smaller piece of pie everybody has to pay for that same $275 million.
Okay, anything else on that? Okay, thank you, Christine. Next, we have our policy revisions. These are the policies that we reviewed at our November 12th work study session. And so this is our first formal reading tonight.
All right, so as a reminder, for any time a policy is proposed to change in our district, we do a formal reading. We do 3 readings before anything is voted on and becomes formal policy. And what we typically do is we take recommendations that come to us from the Minnesota School Boards Association. They often look at model policies that they've developed. Oftentimes they're developed because we have changes in state statute or other guidelines from the Minnesota Department of Education that they push out to us. Their attorneys review those. They have a team that looks at those and they send suggestions out to school districts across Minnesota. Our team looks at those suggestions. We take those to our cabinet to begin with. Our cabinet looks at who needs to begin them. Sometimes policies are very specific to our business department. Sometimes they're really HR related. Sometimes they're teaching and learning specific. Sometimes they're related to student conduct and rights and responsibilities of students. And so we kind of funnel those out for further evaluation and discussion. At times, we will adopt the actual language recommended to us by the Minnesota School Boards Association, and sometimes we take their recommendations and we tweak them because we feel that here in 622, we don't necessarily agree with exactly the things they have proposed and recommended to us. Once our cabinet members take those out to the further teams they recommend, have a look at and recommendations and weigh in on those. Once they've recommended their final draft, those are brought back to our school board at a full work session where we meet all together as a school board and we comb through these together. So what I'm reading to you tonight is the product of our, this is our second reading. So these have now been visited by our school board, having gone through the cabinet, and those extensive teams have reviewed them. We're bringing them, we've brought them through cabinet, and they've now gone to the school board for the first reading, and this is now the second reading. So what I'm going to do tonight is just read you the policy number, the title of it, and I'm just going to read to you what has been proposed to change. I'm not going to read you the full policy because I think we'd be here for hours. But if there is anybody listening or watching who's interested in the actual details, this, of course, is all posted online in our board book, and we always welcome feedback and discussion in between these formal readings for people who want to actually weigh in and have conversations. That's why we have these month-to-month conversations in between readings before we do formal adoption. So without further ado, I'll start reading through these. So The first is policy number 414, mandated reporting of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse. Again, this is an MSBA model policy. Statutory change adds 2 crimes under the definition of sexual abuse, and it's a legal reference revision. The second is a proposed revision to 516, student medication. Again, MSBA recommends this policy change includes a statutory change which adds student possession and use of sunscreen. Previously, that required a doctor's note and now does not need that. Legal reference addition. Revision of 534, unpaid meal charges, contains our own 622 language. In addition, it adds a 2019 Minnesota Attorney General opinion language about not denying students the opportunity to participate in graduation ceremonies due to unpaid meal charges. I will say we've never done that in 622, but it is in our formal policy now with this addition. Revised 601, school district curriculum and instructional goals. It contains some 622 language. Statutory changes, adding dyslexia screening and a legal reference addition. We've also added the addition of the word guardian instead of just parent. Thanks to Teresa Auger, who's continually reminded us of that addition, which has been a great piece we've added. You'll hear that in a number of our policy readings as well. Revision to policy 603, curriculum development. Again, an MSBA model policy adds language regarding dyslexia screening. You'll hear this quite a bit. This was a big topic at the legislature last year. Dyslexia screening included now in our primary grades for reading screenings. And again, the language addition of the word guardian in addition to parent. Revision of policy 613, graduation requirements. 622 language in addition to statutory change, which revises graduation assessment requirements and graduation credit requirements. Legal references have been revised and some just basic grammatical revisions as well. Revision of 615, testing accommodations, modifications, and exemptions for IEPs, Section 504 plans and LEP students. MSBA policy, updated URL for the procedures manual for Minnesota assessments. Revision of 616, school district system accountability, contains 622 language, updated advisory committee provisions, and addition of the word the task of to Section D. Revision of policy 620, credit for learning. This contains 622 language, some statutory changes, delete North Central Association of Colleges and Schools for eligible institution definition. Revision of 703, annual audit. MSBA policy, it updates some Minnesota legal compliance audit guide title and replaces a few words for grammatical changes. Revision of 721, uniform grant guidelines, MSBA policy, and it also updates federal change increases, which 2 threshold levels under procurement methods. And revision of 723, post-issuant debt compliance, MSBA policy, issuers of bonds and other debt-related instruments require the how-to of what organizations will do in complying with the post-issuance of debt. The proposed revision is due to the Securities and Exchange Commission being responsible for enforcing continuing disclosure and the requirement of what procedures need to be followed in order for governmental entities to be in compliance. Revision of policy 802, disposition of obsolete equipment and material. It's an MSBA model policy and also reflects statutory change, which expands potential recipients of surplus school computers and adds option for us to sell and give surplus school computers to qualifying students. So with that, I am recommending that we open the door for any further conversation discussion, if there is any, although we did just discuss these at our recent work study session. So are there any further comments and conversations? Again, tonight is a formal reading, but tonight is not a night we are officially adopting these recommended changes.
Thank you for all the work on this. And Lisa, you and Randy weren't at the last study session, so I've got a question for each of you. First one is under the school district system accountability. We have those new, the process, and it's on page
Which policy number are you referencing?
616.
616?
Yeah, titled
616.
School District System Accountability. So on that, it's the page right after the big diagram. And I just was curious about paragraph C2. I know that the school board reviews annually the expectations of each site and their state, whether or not they met the state expectation. The question I had is where it says the advisory committee shall work with the school site to adopt a plan. I just was curious if that's a new process, and I know you're kind of new to the group, but I don't recall in any of the years I've been on advisory that the advisory committee actually looked at individual site plans. Yeah. I don't recall this, and I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, I just.
We
thought
can look into that, and I'll be honest, I don't actually have the answer to what the history has been here either, and if that's a change, but we can take that back and look into that before our final reading and get some information back on that.
Yeah, and
what the past practice has been.
Yeah, because I don't recall us actually looking at them, and I think also in this policy it references you have to set something by December 15th, and we historically don't have a meeting in December for advisory. So just some thoughts there to look into.
Sure, we can definitely follow up on that.
And then the last one was Randy, and I forget the policy, but it's the one about that where we can up what we're spending. I just made a comment at the last study session that that's $250,000, and just was wondering curiously how that may affect your work in your office as far as, you know, you get 4 of those, that's $1 million. That's a lot of money. If you could just speak to if it's going to change any of your work practice.
No, it shouldn't change anything because our board and our Minnesota state statutes are more stringent than actually those federal guidelines. So as you know, our procurement levels are 175,000.
Yeah.
And so even though the feds, put their levels up to 250,000, we have, board policy and state statutes that are actually more stringent than federal guidelines. So I don't see this impacting, us, one iota, because even if we had something for $250,000, we'd still have to go through the procurement according to state statute.
And they're pretty rare anyway. It's not like
Yeah.
you would have 4 in a day and all of a sudden be spending $1 million. It'd be a pretty rare thing you would ever be spending that amount of money.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so that was the first formal reading, the second reading, and we are not voting on it, so it is not an action item. So next, we have the action items. From the business office, we have acknowledgement of contributions, and Teresa Auger.
Thank you. Minnesota Statute 123B.02 permits school boards to, quote, receive for the benefit of the district bequests, donations, or gifts for any proper purchase and apply the same to the purpose designated. In that behalf, the board may act as a trustee of any trust created for the benefit of the district and for the benefit of pupils thereof, end of quote. Therefore, Director of Business Services recommends the following resolution. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District 622 that the school board accept with appreciation the following contributions and permit their use as designated by the donors. We had several Meals on Wheels donations, and they include Gloria Curtin for $128, Kelly Lafsky, $30, Bonnie Decker, $10, Nadine Pittman Carroll, $4, Newton Payne for $5, Scott and Patty Tongan, $1,000 for the North High State Volleyball student tickets. The Kopp Family Foundation donated $500 for a North High Random Acts of Kindness. Beth Stanley donated a Yamaha Advantage alto saxophone to the North High Band. Steve Schlinker donated $500 to the North High football program. The Tartan Girls Hockey Boosters donated $5,000 for the North Tartan Girls Hockey for their uniforms. North Haven Church donated winter jackets, hats, mittens, and sweatshirts for Richardson Elementary. Jill Standish donated winter hats for Richardson Elementary. Silver Lake United Methodist Church donated hats, mittens, and scarves to Richardson Elementary. Jane Ben Dixon donated fabric-fed embellishments and sewing notions to Richard Elementary. The North St. Paul Fire Diane Walter donated winter hats to Richardson Elementary. White Bear Lake Universal Church donated Kleenex, school supplies, and backpacks for Castle Elementary. We had an anonymous donation of school supplies and backpacks to Castle Elementary. Silver Lake Church donated hats, mittens, and scarves to Castle Elementary. And Premier Bank employees donated $1,280 to the Nutrition Services student meal accounts. The total fiscal 2019-2020 monetary contributions is $64,793.24. And with that, I move with great appreciation all of those to accept those donations.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So Teresa moved and Anderson second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
Michelle, can I say one thing about it?
Yes.
I just want to call attention to two donations that I thought were just so remarkable. One is the couple that donated $1,000 so students could go to the volleyball tournament. I thought that was incredibly generous. Thank you to Scott and Patty Tongan. And then the Premier Bank employees who gave $1,280 to kids whose meal accounts might be, short. I thought that was really, really amazing and very generous. So thank you to Premier Bank employees.
Yeah.
I also noticed that all of these church donations, I think it really talks about a strong community that we have.
Yes, so thank you to all those donors. And do I need to formally say that the motion was approved? Or is we're okay? Okay. All right. Okay, good. Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, we have this combined polling places resolution. And Randy, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, every year, we just have to, it's a state statute now that just came online here about a year ago, and we did the same thing last year. It's a formality, basically, in case special elections are held, so every school district has to go through this at this time of year before December 31st.
Okay, thanks. And I'm going to read the pretty long resolution, and I know folks can get this information on our website, but I think they can also get it from the Secretary of State website, I guess their polling place. Okay, so the resolution establishing combined polling places. Be resolved by the School Board of Independent School District Number 622, State of Minnesota as follows. Number 1, pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 205A.11, the precincts and polling places for school district elections are those precincts or parts of precincts located within the boundaries of the school district, which have been established by the cities or towns located in whole or in part within the school district. The board hereby confirms those precincts and polling places so established by those municipalities. Number 2, pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 205A.11, the board may establish a combined polling place for several precincts for school district elections not held on the day of statewide election. Each combined polling place must be a polling place that has been designated for use as a polling place by a county or municipality. The following combined polling places are established to serve the precincts specified for all school districts' special and general elections not held on the same day as a statewide election in the calendar year following the adoption of the resolution. So the polling places here are River of God Church, North Presbyterian Church, Cowan Elementary School, Richardson Elementary School, Gladstone Fire Station, Wakefield Park Community Building, Maplewood Community Center YMCA, Redeeming Love Church, First Evangelical Free Church, Ramsey County Library, Maplewood Middle School, East Metro Regional Public Safety Training Center, Beaver Lake Education Center, Carver Elementary School, Lutheran Church of Peace, Lake Elmo City Hall, Apostolic Bible Institute and Church, Transfiguration Church, Redeemer Baptist Church, House of Prayer Church, Silver Lake Methodist Church, Oakdale Discovery Center, Hope Evangelical Free Church, Guardian Angels Church, King of Kings Lutheran Church, Number 3, pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 205A.09, the polling places will remain open for voting for school district elections not held on the same day as statewide election between the hours of 7 o'clock a.m. and 8 o'clock p.m. Number 4, the clerk is directed to file a certified copy of this resolution with the county auditors of each of these counties in which the school district is located, in whole or in part, within 30 days after its adoption. Number 5, as required by Minnesota Statute Section 204B.16, Subdivision 1A, the clerk is hereby authorized and directed to give written notice of new polling place locations to each affected household with at least one registered voter in the school district whose school district polling place location has been changed. The notice must be non-forwardable notice mailed at least 25 days before the date of the first election to which it will apply. A notice that is returned as undeliverable must be forwarded immediately to the appropriate county auditor, who shall change the registrant's status to challenged in the statewide registration system. So I need a motion and a second for approval.
So moved.
Moved by Livingston. Second by Ogier. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed say nay. So that resolution is approved. And thank you again, Randy. All right. Okay. Next, we have Superintendent Sales Adams with high school course name change beginning fall 2020.
Good evening, Chair Yenner, members of the board, Superintendent Tuccio Osorio, and Cabinet. This evening, I am pleased to introduce our new secondary coordinator, Suzanne Johnson. As an engineer turned educator, Suzanne has worked in various industries and school systems across the South and Southwest. She comes to ISD 622 having recently served as Director of School Learning and Research with the New Mexico Center for School Leadership. Suzanne's background includes serving as the STEM Instructional Manager with Albuquerque Public Schools, Next Generation Science Standards Implementation Planning Team, and teaching high school science in Georgia and Alabama. This evening, Suzanne will bring forth a recommendation for a high school course name change for the fall of 2020. Suzanne.
Good evening, Board Chair Yenner, board members, Superintendent Tucci Osorio, and Cabinet. As Assistant Superintendent Sales Adams mentioned, I am Suzanne Johnson, the new secondary coordinator for career pathways, curriculum, and staff development. I'm here tonight to propose a high school course name change from American Literature AB to English 11. This year-long course will be offered to 11th grade students at both high schools and alleviates a writing-intensive 10th grade by placing those standards at the grade-appropriate level. English 11 helps fulfill our district's 12-credit English Language Arts graduation requirement by addressing grade-level standards more deeply, being more inclusive of Minnesota American Indian standards, and being more inclusive of media literacy standards. In offering a year-long course, students are more likely to have the same teacher all year, of course, for 3 trimesters, and this allows the students to build a deeper relationship with their teachers and receive more social emotional support in the classroom. This course also allows for more culturally relevant text choice while addressing grade level standards. English 11 is an NCAA compliant course. The 622 Advisory Committee recommended this course for approval with a vote of 15 yes and 2 yes with reservation. I recommend that the resolution for the high school course name change be approved as presented for school year fall 2020 and beyond. Are there any questions or comments?
Teresa?
Suzanne, great job. I won't make it too tough on you. I just want to remind the board that, we adopted to add the extra credit, and so their recommendation has been to put it there in 11th grade. At our meeting last week, we had 2 high school teachers, Aaron in the background representing Tartan, and Bob Hackney was there from North also speaking in support of, and the advisor has several students. They were quite supportive of this change as well. So,
Thank you.
You know, do you know offhand the 2 reservations? Do you have?
Yes, one reservation was about increased cost. What was the cost? And we, of course, would look at that cost as we went through the resource challenges. And then the other reservation was to make sure that there was some alignment with U.S. history and the timing of the American literature standards.
Okay. And I think I could guess, but can you tell me what NCAA compliant means?
That it fulfills requirements for our student athletes to participate in collegiate athletics.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I just want to know how you're going to survive. Is this your first Minnesota winter? coming up?
No, it's not. but
Okay.
yeah, winter's not my favorite. With enthusiasm.
Okay, so I will read the resolution. Be it resolved that the School Board of ISD 622 adopt the course name change beginning fall 2020 for American Lit AB to English 11 ABC. Okay, moved by Ogier. Second by Navy. All in favor say aye. Aye. And all opposed say nay. So that is approved, and thank you again, Suzanne. Okay, next, I'm getting all jumbled. Okay, next we have Superintendent Tucci Osorio with the adoption of the school calendar.
Great, thank you. And thanks to Suzanne. What a great addition to our team she has been, I'll tell you. Calendar recommendation. Normally every year I just put the calendar on the table and you vote and we move on and we barely discuss it. This year's calendar recommendation is a wee bit different, so I thought I'd better take a few minutes and put up a couple of slides and actually spend a little bit of time with you about this. As you know, every year we come to you, I'm going to click some slides, come to you with our calendar recommendation. This is the time of year districts all around us are looking at the calendar recommendation for the coming school year, which seems silly and crazy because we're barely into this school year, but this is kind of the way school works. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how this all works. Our calendar committee is formed with membership from, largely from our teachers union, our administration. We kind of get together folks from different areas kind of looking at the curriculum cycle, the trimesters, how we fit together our instructional practices, and how we fit together basically the instructional day, early childhood all the way through pre-K through high school. We have multiple factors you have to consider whenever you build a calendar. And I say this to you because I used to, prior to coming to this district, I was the co-chair of the calendar committee in my previous district. And it was a job nobody ever wanted because there's never any perfect answer and somebody's always mad at you. But in most districts, you typically have a collaboration between your largest bargaining group, which is your teachers, and a district administration. I mean, that's typically how school districts handle these collaborations in their planning. Some things you have to look at is your instructional days. How many days does your district have adopted for instructional days? Then, and what do you also have in place in your labor negotiation, in your labor contracts for professional development? Grading days, how many grading days are agreed upon in your labor contracts? What are your federal and state holidays that are granted according to your labor contracts? And then what are additional cultural and religious days of importance? They may or may not be days that you would not have school, but they're also days you want to consider in your planning. We have some non-dominant religious groups we also want to consider in our planning for where you might put parent-teacher conferences. You don't want to necessarily put those things on the high holidays for some of our other non-dominant religious groups. You want to always be considering when those fall in the school year. Some of those traditionally land at the same time of the year. Others, such as Ramadan for our Muslim families, rotate throughout the year and don't always land at the same month of the year. And you want to always be looking at those things when you're planning the calendar. Election dates have become increasingly important. In the past, they were kind of an afterthought. Now they're not. With the increased focus on school safety, school districts are putting a much greater emphasis on when you have election dates, especially because schools are traditionally still polling sites. And now, more than ever, there's a large concern about bringing the general public into schools while kids are in session without vast screening of folks coming in through the doors. What's really becoming a trend is schools simply not having school on election days, especially the big election days. And so all of a sudden, what wasn't so much of an issue even 5 years ago is now a really, really big issue. Instructional planning around trimesters. Every school district around us, whether you operate on semesters or trimesters, you're trying to plan your grading days, your conference dates, your breaks to line up whenever possible so they make sense according to whenever your semester or trimester breaks happen. And then, of course, your testing calendars, those big ones like that come through the state, the MCA testing dates, ACT testing dates, those kinds of things. And, of course, graduation dates. It's not just when you happen to choose you're going to have graduation, but if you hold your graduation in a venue that you must reserve years in advance to reserve that venue, you also have to keep that in mind when you're planning a school calendar as well. That being said, once you put all these factors on the table, there's often not a lot of wiggle room for how you might change up your calendar. It's sometimes just moving those deck chairs around the same rotation from year to year and kind of wiggling them around just a little bit. Something that's unique to planning the 2020-21 calendar are a couple things. Number one, Labor Day falls very late this year. It's as late as it could possibly be. It's September 7th. As you know, Labor Day is the first Monday of September. And this year, it's as late as it could possibly be. Compounded with the fact that whenever you have, obviously, a late start, you end up, given the total number of school days that you have in a year, that requires a late end, typically. Unless you're going to squish out everybody's vacation dates in the middle, you're going to end up with, if a late start equates in a late end. Part of the challenge with that is that we are also facing very extensive construction projects planned in our summer months. And for District 622, our largest construction projects are not actually going to hit next summer. It's going to be the following summer. And a very late release that summer would be very challenging on our construction projects. The addition of election days is another factor. In the past, you would just keep on with school on the day that you have a big election, but Election Day 2020 is a big one. And we've already made a commitment that we do not want to hold classes that day. Most of our neighboring districts that I've talked to already have already told me they are not having classes that day as well for students. And when you take away a student contact day that day, it also is one more day less in the picture that you can work with. So some unique challenges that we have not faced in recent times. Now, granted, every so many years you do face a very late Labor Day, so it's not unheard of. But when you combine the construction that we're facing and an election day year that takes away another day of instruction in the middle of that year, it's just kind of compounding factors. With that, our calendar committee, when they met, went, wow, this would be a very late release in June if we were to follow our traditional patterns. And so they decided, what if we considered a start before Labor Day? And we probably should start considering getting feedback on that. Minnesota state statute actually does not allow a start before Labor Day unless you have heavy construction involved that might warrant the need for it, which of course we very much meet that criteria. And so our calendar committee decided they better start getting some stakeholder input because none of them want to have that responsibility without having a lot of feedback. So they began with an employee survey that went out to all employees in the school district through our monthly employee survey. The employee survey was heavily weighted towards actually wanting to start before Labor Day. A number of concerns came in from our employees. Number one, the concern about instructional time. Very much an interest in having the days, the concern about if we stayed very late into June, you've lost a lot of instructional days that could have been put ahead of spring testing calendars. Those AP exams, the ACT exams, the MCA testing for elementary and younger folks, all those instructional days that could have been put earlier in the calendar year and gotten ahead of those spring testing days are now pushed back late in the year and in their opinion, really lost days that you could have had ahead of, the end of year culmination summative exams where we would have liked to have gotten those instructional days in early. And the second day is just concerns about, teaching so late into June in the summer heat that also kicks in at that time. After that, we took that feedback and went to our district administrators. We have a monthly meeting with all of our principals, but included in that are also our cabinets, and also all of our supervisors of programs come to that same monthly meeting. We had a very lengthy discussion and breakout groups and conversations at that meeting. And overwhelmingly, unanimously, that group came back to us with the recommendation to start before Labor Day for that calendar year next year. So from there, obviously we came back to our board. We started with our board and presented the idea, and I know many of you went, wait a minute, I'm not sure we quite agree with this. Many of you had concerns about kids who maybe work at the state fair and how would that interrupt their work experience, families who take vacations. And I shared those same concerns with you as well. When we took that out to the employees, we took that to district administration, many of the administrators and principals said, you know, not that many of our students do. There are some, but there's so many more who do not work at the state fair. And there are so many of our constituents for whom that is truly not an issue. And they were more concerned about the instructional benefit of starting earlier. So we took it back to our board, had another small discussion about that, and made a commitment to go back out and survey our 622 families and survey our 622 high school students. Those groups, by the way, employees and district administrators were weighing heavily on start early. The families and the high school students were pretty evenly split on the topic, 50-50, quite evenly. So then the calendar committee came back together and studied all of their input. I will tell you this, well over 2,000 people weighed in on this conversation in their survey results. So this is not a survey that was ignored. So there's not a really good, strong, there's not going to be an outcome where everybody's going to be completely happy, but overwhelmingly, the calendar committee 100% unanimously felt a strong recommendation to start before Labor Day next year, which is the 2021 recommendation. I've talked to some of our neighboring districts, South Washington County, Stillwater, two of our neighboring districts. Both have told me they are also making the same recommendation. South Washington County is a district who's never done that before either, and had many of the same conversations we did, and for the same reasons we did. It was about the instructional learning time happening earlier when you could get the most out of those learning days, and when the focus is high and strong, and making sure we can get the most reading gains and math gains out of those days. So before you is a calendar that's come forward, the proposal that's come from our calendar committee. I want to tell you this is a committee that has wrestled at great length with this recommendation. They've taken a lot of time with it. They've taken a lot of time to go back out to different constituent groups and get feedback and surveys. They've had many, many meetings about this. And when the committee finally did cast their final recommendations to send with us, they also made sure they sent it with many of their own personal statements of the why. And overwhelmingly, each and every single member of this committee, the why had to do with instructional and learning time for students and maximizing the learning year for students. So that was kind of their big recommendation. I don't sit on the calendar committee, so I'm bringing forth their recommendation. And I like to play devil's advocate and all the reasons why it may or may not be a good idea, but I will tell you after many conversations with them, I do 100% stand behind their recommendation, knowing full well there's probably going to be people who are really not happy because it's a big change in thinking of how we do things. I at first was not, I could really have flip-flopped either way, and I really was not a big fan of the idea initially myself, but having spent a lot of time looking at this, I stand before you tonight 100% behind their recommendation. And I've really spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people about this too, and I think they've done their due diligence in digging into the issue. I will also say this, next year will be an interesting trial to see if you do adopt their recommendation. It'll be an interesting trial to see how this goes. I will make sure we gather a lot of feedback after the fact to see how people felt about it if you do adopt this recommendation this evening. Before you are also some of the highlights. Obviously, you're not going to read the teeny tiny calendar, but it's also going to be, if adopted tonight, we would send out a lot of communication about the why. It wouldn't just be a calendar that's published, and we would make sure people got some pretty explicit reasons why and some really strong communication. Please pay attention. This is a change, so people don't gloss over it and think it's just the same as it was in the past. So without further ado, I'll stand ready for questions or comments.
Well, as you know from the discussions in the work study sessions, I'm not in favor of big changes. Never have been. I'm an old man. I like things to stay the same. And especially this change of school starting before Labor Day. I am swayed quite a bit by the conversation about the instructional learning time, because I really do believe that's more valuable early in the year than it is at the end of the year. I'm a parent of 6 kids, and I think I could prove that over and over and over again every year at the end of May. But I really don't like the idea of starting after Labor Day. However, this change, I think, has been well vetted. I think there's been a tremendous amount of input into the change. And so my intention this evening is to vote yes on it without reservation. But I do want to challenge us to continue to look at ways that we can improve the way we deliver education in this school district in ways that students are most able to benefit from the services and the education we provide. And I think that would include conversations about year-long school. I think that would include conversations about looking at different start and stop times for the school day. I mean, I think there's a lot of innovation going on around the country, and I think that if we're truly vested in making changes which are based on the best instructional opportunities for our children, then I think we have a lot of conversations yet to have about how to do that. Having said that, I think that this change has been well vetted, and I think it's worthy of doing it and seeing what mileage we get out of it.
Christine, I was just curious, when you meet with your cohorts, superintendents, if there will be any future consideration of asking legislatively if we can just formally close school on election days. Yeah, you know, I'm not sure if that means one less educational day, but because it's becoming, I think, a standard in many of the schools not to have school on those big election days like a presidential year or something. And so I was just curious if moving forward, when you know, with your superintendent groups, if it's going to be a topic of conversation that we'll try to get elevated to their end.
Well, I'll tell you this. You already have the right, though. I mean, you already have the authority to do that. So I don't know why.
I mean, for them to close school like they do.
So, I mean, if you're saying make it a state holiday.
Well, I don't know if that would be the
I mean,
right term, but
I've actually heard conversation about whether it should be a state or a federal holiday. There's been conversation about that. I will tell you this, though. If, as a school district, we agree we want 172 instructional days, you just have to figure out where else you put the day. So whether the state tells us we have to close that day or we decide ourselves, which we already have the right to do, it really wouldn't make a big difference because we still would have to figure out where the instructional day goes. If we're moving those deck chairs around, we got to figure out where that chair goes. And I'll tell you what, this year, looking at the 2020 calendar, that chair wasn't easy to put somewhere because one of the challenges was, do you make your winter break shorter? And sometimes that one chair is really tricky because do you have people come in on a Monday of your 2 week of winter break, or do you have them stay come back that extra Monday after you've wrapped up school for the year? That one extra day, that deck chair is not always easy to put somewhere. It's been a really interesting challenge. One single day can make a difficult calendar to plan. But like I said, you know, Minnesota state requirement is you have 165 days of school. We as a district decided we want 172. So we don't have to have those. We could decide we're not going to make it up and we'd be fine. For ADM, we'd be fine for that. But we as a district decided we wanted to have that. So if the state said you don't have to come to school that day, we could say, okay, but we're going to make it up because we value that day, or we would not make it up. I mean, I'm just saying that power is kind of in our hands. A bigger conversation that is happening a lot with the legislature, and districts in a lot of places are lobbying for this, is to change the law that says you can't start before Labor Day. Many districts are fighting that rule. Now, in state law, it says if you do have a certain amount of construction underway. I think it's 400,000 or 500,000, something, 500. If you have $500,000 worth of construction, you can actually get a waiver for that, which we will do if we pass this tonight. And to be perfectly honest, we could do that every year. We always have a roof replacement or anything that, our district's large enough, just basic repairs every year would qualify us for that. But if you're a small district, you wouldn't get that waiver unless the state changed state law, right? So you're not big enough to ever use that rule because it's a dollar amount, it's not a percent. We benefit because we're large, but there's a lot of districts who are actually trying to lobby for that law to change about starting before Labor Day and wanting to be able to do that. That's a big platform item for a number of districts actually every year on the legislative platform. Good question though.
Okay, for me, this was hard because I guess I just feel like school starts the day after Labor Day. And
Right.
that's just the way it is. So I hope that, I understand the rationale. I think it's a good rationale, and I appreciate the work the calendar committee has done to put this calendar together. But I'll be curious to see how it goes.
I agree, and it could be bumpy. I will tell you, it's hard to make a change. When they came to me with the recommendation, I went, "What? Really?" But the more I learned about it, I thought it does make sense.
It makes sense. Okay, I'm going to read the resolution. So adoption of 2020-2021 school calendar. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 622 that the attached calendar be approved and adopted for the 2020-2021 school year, and that pursuant to Minnesota Statute 645.44 subdivision 5, the School Board of Independent School District number 622 has determined that Columbus Day is not a legal holiday, and therefore public business, including school board and informational meetings, may be transacted on that day. Additionally, schools will be open on Veterans Day, and in accordance with state statute, will have at least 1 hour of activities in observance of Veterans Day. So I need a motion and a second for that. Okay, moved by Livingston. Second by Anderson. All in favor say aye. Aye. And all opposed say nay. Okay, so we have a calendar. Thanks again to that committee, and thank you, Christine. All right, next we have school board. Okay. For the school board, we are going to set an agenda, time, and location for the December 3rd work-study session. We have a date set, but we need to take action on the location, time, and agenda. So I'm going to read this resolution. That the December 3rd work session begin at 4:30 p.m. in room 202 of the District Education Center and include the following agenda items: John Glenn and Carver update, audit and fund balance for 2019-2022, final levy certification, budget timeline for 2020-2021, current 2019-2020 budget update, superintendent check-in, board committee discussion, board officer succession, and board check-in. There's a lot. Yes. So can I,
It's my grandson's second birthday, and I've been invited, so I may not be there. It depends on what time that, it ends, so. But I'm curious about that LHB thing, if that would be available online or something, if I do miss it.
Absolutely, we can make sure you have access to the virtual tours. You're speaking about the virtual tours for Carver and John Glenn. We'll absolutely make sure you have an opportunity to connect with that.
Thank you.
okay, so can I get a motion and a second for that agenda, time, and location? So moved. Okay, moved by Livingston. Second by Ogier. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. So we have that one set. Then we have a set special meeting. That a special meeting be set for January 14th, 2020 in the boardroom of the District Education Center with a start time of 4:30. And the following agenda items. Number 1, election of officers, and number 2, organizational resolution. Can I get or is there any discussion about that one? Can I get a motion and a second? Moved by Anderson. Second by Livingston. All in favor say aye. Aye. And all opposed say nay. Okay, this special meeting is set. And then the last one here is set time, agenda, and location for our January 14th, 2020 work study session. So that the January 14th, 2020 work study session begin immediately following the adjournment of the January 14th, 2020 special meeting with an approximate start time of 4:45 p.m. in conference room 202 of the District Education Center, and include the following agenda items. Number 1, Wold Facility Presentation. Number 2, 2020-2021 Enrollment and Financial Projections and Budget Revisions. Number 3, Superintendent Check-In. Number 4, Policy Adoption. And number 5, Board Check-In. So I need a motion, a second for that.
So moved.
Moved by Livingston. Second by Anderson. All in favor say aye. Aye. And all opposed say nay. So we have that meeting set as well. Okay, next on our agenda is our board communications. Caleb, do you want to start us off?
Nothing to say.
Okay. Teresa?
From advisory, we met last week, and, you know, they're all new staff with the exception of Heidi. She introduced herself as being there one whole year, and the rest of her colleagues are quite new.
Promoted out of the district.
Yeah, and so, but I say it because I've never seen such contagious enthusiasm among them. And they all looked to Heidi like, okay, what do we do? What do we do? And I felt so bad for her because she's still fairly new as well. You know, if you might recall, we had like 25 applicants from each high school for being on that. And so 5 students were selected from North and Tartan, and our own Manny Alvarez is a representative from North High. So it was kind of fun to see him. In addition to the 11th grade thing, we had Sean speak a little bit about the online, and just to give you a quick update, we have 21 courses that are currently online, and the focus is strictly on 11th and 12th grade right now, and that's what they want to continue to get up and fully going January of 2020. They will be launching an online academy in 2021. That's their goal. And it would be for options for the last 2 years of high school. He shared that the intent is to recruit our own students in the district, but that it's been made very clear by our superintendent that we are going to offer it for outside students as well. So they know.
Someday down the road.
And that's exactly what he said. And then, of course, he talked about Schoology and how that's been implemented throughout the high school, and the goal is to expand that to middle school in the coming years. And one thing that's really needs to be remembered is that embedded in those courses is a bunch of online opportunities. Another big thing is in another new math test. So this year we are going to be doing a new math assessment, which will be, we're going back to the NWEA, you might remember. They offer that test 3 times a year. So this year's grades are going to be our baseline. So Rachel David really talked about how we won't have any data at all to know how we're doing and how to measure it, but our initial first glimpse of those grades has set the bar very high for this fall setting, so that was really exciting. And then we are not meeting in December, and so we are looking at what we're going to try to do for the rest of the year. So, you know, the activities are led, the students lead the icebreaker, and they sit at each table, so it's pretty engaging to have them so active in the group.
Just 2 quick things. One, we have such talent in this district. I'm looking at Ben's T-shirt, spam a lot. Yeah. And then at Maplewood Community Center, the Ashland production play of Beauty and the Beast. Tim and I brought tickets for 11 people, including all the grandkids, and it was just amazing. And it goes through December 1st, so if you can get over to that. We have a lot of students from the district that are in the play, and it's just amazing. The other thing, so Tim and I we have 3 kids, and our older daughter was a stay-at-home mom for 16 years, but she just started a job in a St. Paul Public School. She's a graduate of the University of Iowa. So she texted me this on her first day of work after she got home. I almost cried 3 times because A, these sweet, innocent little kid stories are so heart-wrenching sometimes, and B, I'm overwhelmed with emotion. When I got home, I cried hard when I was describing my job to my family. So, you know, sometimes I think she's got a heart for this kind of work, and I think that's what counts. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you.
Well, I just want to take another opportunity to say thank you to Randy for making the property tax thing so clear and easy to understand. But my takeaway from that, you know, you said you were going to give us talking points. My takeaway from that, though, is first of all, I think that the administration and the cabinet did an excellent job of being concerned about what they were hearing and seeing and following up immediately to make sure that we had actually done our due diligence to keep our promise to the taxpayers. And then, again, more kudos to Christine and the cabinet for this commitment to transparency in our school district, that the public at any time can call, hear, and be directed to the right person to give them a full and transparent answer to the questions they have. So I didn't have any committee work to report on, but I just wanted to share and emphasize that because I think that's a tremendous commitment on the part of Christine and the cabinet that we don't always appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier today, Nikki Clymer mentioned a community education event that, community education helped put it together. It was a Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead event. It was back on November 1st. There was traditional dance performances, arts and crafts, and a taco food truck. It was free and really pretty amazing. I think it was the first time they did this, and I can't wait to see it grow.
Thanks, Ben. I have a few quick things, too. I went to the MSBA pre-delegate assembly this weekend, which is a little bit like a study session for the delegate assembly, where we look at the resolutions. I think there were about 23 resolutions. They mainly focused on things like making funding for education more equitable across the state, and districts wanting more flexibility in how they spend their money. So, you know, to be able to use certain pots of money for projects that they normally couldn't. There were interesting proposals. I was waiting to hear one that we don't have to use the newspaper anymore, but I didn't hear one, so maybe next year. The delegate assembly, where we will vote on those proposals, and then it will become the agenda for MSBA, is in early December. I also visited Carter Blue, and when Christine talked about voice amplification earlier, I was really impressed by that system at Carter Blue. I don't think I was aware of it before that we were doing that, and they did talk a lot about the students didn't like the loud voices, or, you know, had negative reactions to loud voices, and when the teachers were yelling to make sure that everyone could hear them, it was so much better to have that voice amplification system. So I was really happy to hear that we're doing that throughout the district. And then the third thing is just I want to wish the high school students good luck on their finals coming up. Now that I have a high school student, I'm aware of these things. So, Okay, and then I also want to remind the board that after this meeting, we're going for a closed session upstairs. Go ahead.
We just want to wish all the staff and their families. We want to wish all the staff and their families a wonderful holiday over this Thanksgiving, whether you celebrate it or not. Save your family and friends.
All right, so our future board meeting dates are December 3rd, 2019 work study session at 4:30 in room 202. December 17th, 2019 business meeting at 6 p.m. in the boardroom. January 14th, 2020 special meeting, 4:30 in the boardroom. January 14th, 2020 work study session, approximate start time of 4:45 p.m. or immediately following the adjournment of the special meeting. So if there is nothing else, we can adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Livingston. Second by Anderson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and all opposed say nay. Meeting's adjourned.